For once, I'm actually making an effort to not wait until the last minute to complete my Ren Fair costumes. Unfortunately, I am still procrastinating on them. The start of this video was filmed in October of 2024, and it's now approximately 6 months later, but I am finishing it, which is more than can be said of some of my projects. So the subject at hand is Lenore from Castlevania, one of my dream cosplays because everybody needs a problematic fave. But despite how much I love the character and the series as a whole, Lenore is a cosplay that I've been putting off because she is a skinny animated pale vampire lady, and of those 5 things, I am a lady, and depending on what time of the year it is, I may or may not be pale. But I keep telling myself that it is time to stop limiting myself to my insecurities and that I'm not going to let my self-image issues get in the way of me having a good time, so here I go. Lenore has a number of stunning outfits that she wears during the animated series. I am in love with this blue dress with the sheer sleeve, and of course I want to make that dress someday as well, but I think this black dress with the blue puff detailing is one of her most iconic dresses in the show. Although really, when is she not iconic? For the dress, I'm using a pattern by Merida called the slashed sleeve dress and layered cape, and the printed pattern is thick. So enjoy this big ol' montage of me putting this absolute beast of a pattern together while I talk about how cool Merida's work is. This isn't the first pattern I purchased from Merida. They have a lovely collection of downloadable patterns for a wide variety of different cosplays. They even have pattern packs called Made to Modify, where it's a bundle of patterns that are intentionally designed in such a way to be interchangeable and make things easy for you to customize a pattern that suits your needs. And all of the patterns come with a super helpful step-by-step readme document with diagrams to show you the best way to go about assembling your project. If you haven't seen any of Merida's work, I highly recommend you check it out. Even if you're not into cosplay and maybe just want to get into sewing and want a couple of really solid base patterns at a reasonable price, they have a lot of really cool things available. So now that I have all of my pieces cut out of paper, it is time to commit and cut all of my pieces out of fabric. For the dress, I'm using a matte black stretchy faux leather that I purchased for a different project that I ended up using a completely different material for. Not only does using this fabric I already own help me feel better about not continually adding to my huge fabric stash, it also has a really great texture and it drapes super nicely because it's a bit of a heavier material, and I like that in a dress, especially one that's shaped like this. Plus, it'll have more of that bodycon feel in the bodice that animated characters kind of have. For the contrasting fabric in the neckline and inside of the slashed sleeves, I have this blue micro suede, which I love. I bought a bunch of it because it was on sale, and so far the only time I've used it is for a vest that I made for when I cosplayed my D&D character Io, and I've been looking for a good place to put more of this very pretty fabric, and I can't think of a better place than in one of my dream costumes. And as much as I would love to say that I also made her beautiful fluffy white cape as well, I did not, partly because Ren Fair season is generally August to October, and where I live that can be a pretty hot time of the year, so I probably wouldn't have ended up wearing the cape anyways. But the main reason is because of the fur. Whether it's fake or not, fur can be super expensive, and enough fur to make a full-length cape is asking just way too much of my bank account. But another bonus of working with the faux leather is that it doesn't fray, so I don't have to serge the edges, which means I only have to serge the blue fabric, which is so cool because while I don't mind the serging process, threading a serger is a cruel and unusual punishment, and for some reason I always have to rethread my serger 3 or 4 times before it decides I've suffered enough and mysteriously starts working. And well, really the rest is clipping and sewing and pinning and sewing and clipping and pinning and sewing again. The body of the dress is made of 7 panels. There's a front piece, 2 side front pieces, and then 2 back pieces for either side of the zipper, and 2 side back pieces. I stitched the front piece to the side fronts and then both halves of the back. Nothing unusual in that process. However, I did keep testing the pieces on my body and was kind of noticing that things were not quite lining up how they should. Luckily, it just seemed like the dress was too big in a few places and not too small or put together incorrectly, so before sewing the side pieces together, I decided to put the dress on inside out and pin the sides along my body to sort of custom fit the dress to my needs. So just like the dress bodice, I put the sleeve on and then pinned the sleeve as close as I could to my body before sewing that shut and cutting off the excess. And then, you know, I took a half-year-long break to do other stuff, as you do, I guess. December rolls around and every artist and crafter gets a little busy because they decide to hand make all their presents and everything devolves into chaos. But really, I think I took a break at this specific moment because I was intimidated by the sleeves and consequently became overwhelmed and abandoned the project for a while. And I wasn't wrong, this part needed quite a bit of help from the seam ripper, but I managed to get it to work in the end, and it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. So these sleeves have a slash design, so the top seam of the outer sleeve is sewn in a dashed line to leave these little gaps so the contrasting fabric peeks through. The under sleeve has an extra gathered portion to create more volume in the little puffs that peek out. It wasn't as difficult as I thought, but there were a couple things that I put in backwards that I had to seam rip and do again. Or I had a couple mistakes that I just needed to live with. One mistake that I wish I had caught sooner was the little piece of fabric as the cuff. I didn't understand why they had me cut out and reattach about 1.5 inches of fabric onto the end of the sleeve, especially since it was made of the same material. Turns out if I had pinned it the other way around, right side and wrong side together instead of just right sides together, I would have had a really pretty smooth cuff at the end of my sleeve. But my brain for some reason was not processing how the sleeves were supposed to go together until I got to the point of almost no return. It's a bit of a bummer, but as they say, perfection is the enemy of the good, and I think if I had to seam rip the whole sleeve apart and fix it, I would have abandoned this project for another 6 months. So while it could have been nicer, it is at least assembled, which is more than can be said of it 6 months ago. So a win is a win. Also enjoy this rare sighting of my more camera shy cat Gigi while his brother looks on in envy. Okay, so now that we have two identifiably assembled sleeves, there was one last step before attaching them to the bodice. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to readjust these puffs every time I put on this dress or moved my arm in the wrong way, so I just did some really bare bones hand stitching to make sure that the puffs had at least some structure to them. And don't judge me for my lazy hand stitching. It doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to work. But with that, the sleeve can be attached to the bodice, and now it really feels like this dress is actually coming together. The next part of the dress to be assembled is the pretty blue neckline to match the slashed sleeves, which is made of 4 long strips sewn together into a rectangle, pressed flat, and then stitched to the neckline. I don't know if you can tell because of the lighting changes, but I did put this off until the next day because I thought it was going to be way harder than it actually was. Turns out this was one of the least frustrating parts of the project, and you know, in this house we love a low effort, high reward task. I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but for some reason my blue contrast neckline didn't quite line up with the back of my dress, most likely because I have a bad habit of making really small seam allowances because I'm nervous that I'll take in too much and the final result won't fit. I ended up just taking in those extra couple of inches in the back when installing the invisible zipper. I know I probably should have used a black zipper, but I didn't have one, so it is what it is. And after the zipper was installed and I made sure that all the serged edges were hidden and everything looked relatively neat, I got the needle and thread back out and began hand stitching about every 2 to 3 inches to create these little puffed sections. There's not a science or uniformity to the way I did it. I just tried to make a bunch of cute little gathers, pulled the thread as tight as I could, and hoped for the best. Hand stitching isn't exactly my strong suit. Before finishing the bottom edge of the dress, I actually took some time to work on other sections of the project because I was super torn as to whether I should leave the dress with a raw edge, just cutting it a little shorter and maybe more even, or if I should properly hem it, or if I should do a horsehair trim around the bottom. I opted to go with horsehair, but there was a part of me that was super worried that because of the heavy and stretchy fabric, it would end up looking really weird. But I went for it because I decided that if it did work, it was going to look really good, and it was going to give it that animated, flowy, perfect ruffle structure look. Luckily, I ended up committing to it, and I was so glad I did. Not only did it do exactly what I had hoped it would, it also made the hemming process go a little smoother, which was really nice. Onto the accessory section of things. The most necessary accessory for a vampire is teeth. I had a pack of press-on nails that I took the pinkies from, filed down into points, and made them a little flatter so they fit my teeth shape better. I did try to file down the surface to make them less shiny, which helped a little, but I was kind of hoping that underneath the pinkish off-white was a more neutral off-white base, but unfortunately that was not the case, so they are a little bit poorly color matched for my teeth, which makes sense because the intended purpose of fake nails, believe it or not, is not being fake teeth. I would love to try the thermoplastic tooth method. A lot of cosplayers use this and it looks fairly easy, but I don't have any on hand for the video, so we are working with what we got. So I took a little bit of denture glue because the only glue we're putting in our mouths is glue designed to go into the mouth, and I stuck these bad boys over my canines. They're not perfect, but they're kind of fun and cute and way more comfortable than I thought they'd be. For the rest of the accessories for the Lenore cosplay, cosplay, specifically her ear cuffs, her belt, her necklace, and her hairpiece, I found some STL files online from a seller called Nin Crafts on Etsy. They actually have a ton of really beautifully modeled cosplay accessories available in their shop, and I have purchased from them several times, and it is always a good time. Now, all of those little pieces go in a box and get blasted with some metallic spray paint, which is so satisfying. I love metallic spray paint. It looks so cool, and it has such an instant gratification about it. Also, kids, remember, if you're going to spray paint something, do it in a well-ventilated area. A cosplayer may not always show their safety measures on screen, but we're not out here trying to promote unsafe behaviors. The easiest of the little 3D printed pieces was the hair clip, second to the ear cuffs, which really required nothing. I just glued the two pieces of the hair clip together and then glued that onto a small styling clip that I had laying around. I'm sure that this is supposed to be part of like a fancy hair comb, but the clip fit perfectly behind the printed piece, so obviously I'm going to use that. Oh wow, a Lenore wig. Where did that come from? Maybe a wig styling video that I put out like 2 years ago where I said I was gonna cosplay Lenore. Oops. The next accessory is the belt, which I forgot to film entirely. I don't know, I just got in the zone and forgot that I make videos. But it's a piece of shiny black faux stretch leather cut to a length slightly longer than the circumference of my waist, sewn into a tube, turned inside out, pressed flat, and then having these bits glued onto it. Actually, these two pieces were supposed to go on the necklace, but I lost the matching little diamond stud and I didn't have time to reprint the whole thing, and this looked pretty cool anyways. And last, the necklace, which was a bit more of an in-depth project than I anticipated. If you are a jewelry maker, whether that's on a hobby or on a professional level, don't look too closely at this, or maybe don't look at it at all. I'm not a jewelry maker. I don't have the proper jewelry making tools. I have a tiny little zip tie cutter and a big old pair of needle nose pliers that I stole from my partner's tool chest, and we're just gonna have to make this work for us. So with those weapons of destruction in hand, I got to work destroying the old jewelry my sisters so kindly donated to me. I did my best to get jump rings, chains, beads, anything that I could use to connect my pieces together. I actually was trying to shorten the chain on this necklace specifically because I like toggle clasps a lot. I think they're really convenient, but who would have guessed zip tie cutters are not a good substitute for wire cutters. Yes, I did try the cutters that were on the plier as well. Either I'm too weak for the jewelry making hobby, or perhaps this necklace is of higher quality than I expected, which kind of makes me feel bad about dissecting it. But with Lenore's necklace completed, that is our final step in the journey, so it is time for the reveal. Alright, for some behind the scenes and cat footage time, I am so glad I took the time to complete this dress, to take the extra fabric in and make it fit nicely, to use these gorgeous fabrics that I was savoring, holding on to, waiting for just the right project, and also to not wait until I quote unquote looked right for the part. The thing I am most disappointed with is the fact that the Renaissance Festival isn't coming to town for another 4 or 5 months, so there isn't a place that I get to immediately wear this to. But besides that, the whole outfit is everything I had hoped and more. Getting into the full Lenore cosplay just sparked so much joy. I finally get to be my horrid, bad, toxic vampire lady. My life is complete. Well, Almost. Because I mean, I still need to make the fur cloak. I can't just keep substituting a fluffy blanket in for that. And you know, maybe someday I'll get my husband to cosplay as Hector, and maybe I'll convince my sisters to dress up as Carmilla and Striga. Maybe, but who knows? Not me.
Hold on, I have a funnier idea. Because they're vampires and we don't have reflections.